would you react to a life-threatening diagnosis of cancer? Would you be in control of the cancer, or would the cancer be in control of you? More importantly, how would you learn from this experience to help others? My name is Lisa Kreitz, and this is my story.
Is there anything in 2001 that you guys remember that just rings a bell? Any happy marriages? Absolutely 9/11, something that will live in infamy in this country, and our family was affected by that as well. Anything else in 2001? Anybody get married? Yes. You got married? Great, 12 years, congratulations. Any happy divorces in 2001? You fired your husband? Good for you. You go, girl. I want to tell you about my 2001. In 2001, January of 2001, I was engaged. I was 34 years old. My first engagement, my first marriage, everything. So actually, I hadn't gotten married. So my family was very, very happy that someone had finally decided to take me off their hands. I have 3 brothers, and they were like, "What are you thinking, dude?" So 2001 in January was a very happy time for my family. What was very happy quickly became a very sad time. In February 2001, my father was diagnosed with something called Mallory-Weiss syndrome. His esophagus, his artery in his esophagus tore, and he almost bled to death. He flatlined in the trauma center, and he was in ICU for 6 weeks. The doctor said if he lived, he would definitely be a vegetable. Luckily, through the grace of God and a lot of miracles, he lived, and he's still alive today. November 2001, I was finally married. Again, another very happy time in my family's life. What was a very happy time quickly became a very sad time. 2 weeks after I was married, my mother died in a car accident. Unfortunately, she pulled out in front of somebody. They T-boned her, and she was ejected from the vehicle, and she was dead on scene. And as you can imagine, that was a very, very difficult time for my family. I remember, first of all, being very, very traumatized. You're in shock, obviously. But I also had this overwhelming feeling of helplessness and a loss of control because I could do nothing about my mother's death.
I never felt that again until 8 years later when I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
It was the first time in those 8 years I was traumatized. I was in shock. And again, I had this overwhelming feeling of helplessness and a loss of control. And what was worse, I didn't even have my mother here to help me through what I knew was going to be a life-changing experience as a female. Within a few days, I had met with physicians I never really wanted to meet, to be honest, all very nice, capable people. Of course, my primary care physician, you have this team, your primary care, your surgeon, your potential reconstructive surgeon, and of course, my oncologist. And so basically, I asked Dr. Zim, I said, look, if I was your daughter or your wife, what would you tell me to do? He said, I would tell you, you have 2 options. He says, number 1 is a lumpectomy, and you would have chemo-based radiation, and you would take tamoxifen for 5 years. He said the second option is to do a more proactive, aggressive approach, is to go ahead and have a bilateral mastectomy. I knew I did not want this disease to affect me any longer than it had to. And I knew that every year I went to have a mammogram. If I had only done the lumpectomy and chemo-based radiation, every year I would be scared to death that breast cancer came back. And every morning I took that little anti-cancer pill called tamoxifen, would remind me that I'd had breast cancer. And we all have to do what is psychologically acceptable to us. So I ultimately chose a bilateral mastectomy. And it was interesting. I was 42 at the time. This was 4 years ago. And I was talking to my aunt, who was 72 at the time. She was so upset that I had chosen to have my breast amputated. Even though I was going to do reconstruction, she just couldn't understand it. She says, Lisa, as a female, she's a female as a breast, you just can't do that. And I said, Aunt Faye, we're from a different era. And I said, this is the bottom line. I said, I'm much more emotionally connected to my hair than that of my breasts. So if something was going to go, it's going to be the breast every time. So, I'm, vaguely awake, and I look up, and I was thinking, oh, my cousin. She's like 6 foot tall, blonde hair, so pretty. And all of a sudden, it was like, oh, I'm so happy to see my cousin. She looks so cute. Oh my gosh, she's got breasts and I don't. And it was my first touch with reality. as to what had happened and the choices I had made to deal with my breast cancer. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad I made every one of those choices, but this is what happens. We're all in business here. You guys are all women in business. We go into the seriousness aspect, okay, let's get down to business. What do we need to do? How do we need to take care of this? Let's make the best decisions possible. I was in that mode. Everything happened so quickly. After my mastectomy was my first touch with reality. What had happened in the decisions I made? And the fact that my cousin still had breasts and I didn't. Albeit she has very, very small breasts, but she still had them and I didn't. When I was finally able to get out of bed, which really brings us to the whole focus of not necessarily that I had breast cancer, what I tried to do to make other breast cancer patients' lives a little easier than mine. Basically, I get out of bed, and mind you, before I had the mastectomy, my physician said, Lisa, you're going to have drains when you wake up from surgery. Okay, have some drains. I didn't know that they were going to be drains that came out of my body and literally went all the way down to my knees. I had 4 of them, and so I'm literally walking around the hospital room like this, and I said, what am I supposed to do with these drains? He's like, I don't know. He says, tuck them in your underwear or something, you know, these pragmatic pieces of advice. And I said, well, Dr. Diaz, when can I shower, and how do I shower with these? He says, oh, you can't shower with those drains. I said, why not? He says, in essence, what comes out of the tap water is not sterile. He said, and same scenario, why we drink filtered water every day. There's bacteria and pathogens in tap water, and ultimately, these are sutured into our armpits. There's a hole, basically, in our armpit. It's to draw fluid out from the traumatic surgery. They don't want water going into the body, thus increasing the chance of infection. I'll go home and start doing some research online. I mean, there's all kinds of paraphernalia when you want to walk your dog to protect them, so there's got to be something for a mastectomy patient. Lo and behold, nothing existed. Nothing. So I got in the shower with this trash bag, literally like this. Mind you, I've got these things. I've got 4 of these hanging out of my armpits. And I'm trying to shower. So I'm trying to protect these areas. I've got all this stuff hanging off of me. I've got bandages. And I kept thinking, women have been going through mastectomies in this country for 70 years. Why is there not a product to protect me? Of course, my first thought, sorry men, I thought, yeah, there's a bunch of men running these mastectomy garment companies and they don't know any better. I began drawing on a napkin, some kind of a little, just a shower shirt, something with the bells and whistles and the paraphernalia. I called my brother, my younger brother, and I asked him if he could draw basically kind of an architectural schematic for me. Now, I call him an architect. He calls himself an engineer, but all I know is he draws buildings. If he can create buildings, he can create a little shower product. So he said, sure. So he drew something. Within a few weeks after that, I'd gone back to my aunt and my cousin, who are phenomenal seamstresses, and I said, can you take this architectural schematic and create a prototype for me? So within a few more weeks after my mastectomy, I had this architectural drawing and this prototype. I felt so good. I was back in control of something because I felt like I had no control. You know, the doctors were in charge of my body. I was back in control of something. I was going to create a product for all these future breast cancer patients so they would not be reduced to a trash bag like I was. Over the next few weeks, through friends of friends, I found a manufacturer. And we literally worked. Now, we ended up going through 5 different prototypes over the next several months. But this looks like a basic kind of shower jacket, right? Well, it was incredible in terms of trying to perfect it. We ended up adding microfiber drawstrings. We have a cinch strap which sets on the neck almost like a turtleneck. Key issues are these pockets on the inside. And remember, they come out of your armpit. They go down to your knees. So we did a flap here to take up the slack and put the pockets in. So you would think you'd look at that. Oh, that's simple to design. It actually took us a while because I was in and out of the hospital a lot during that time with complications. I'll go into that in a minute. And my doctor would say, Lisa, you're going to have drains again. I'm like, that's okay. I have a prototype coming from my manufacturer. I'll just test it out. But what's supposed to be 3 surgeries and done, I ended up with 7 surgeries, 2 hospital-acquired infections, and 4 months of hyperbaric treatments. I believe my complications with this breast cancer and the reconstruction kept me focused on the shower shirt. I was tired of physicians. I was tired of surgeons. I hated those drains. But you know, I loved the shower shirt because it was the cathartic project that kept me focused on something besides feeling sorry for myself. And every day I missed my mother. But every day I could feel her pushing me as she had when I was growing up. There were many days I stayed in bed. I didn't feel well, and it was out of fear. I thought, am I crazy? I had drains in my body, I had infection, and I started a company to help women. And there were many times I cried and I said, I quit, I can't do this anymore. And I would hear this real peaceful voice in my mind, or in my head, Lisa, keep doing what you're doing. And I would say, but that's the problem, I don't know what I'm doing. Lisa, keep doing what you're doing. This voice helped me. This voice helped me focus on what I was attaining in terms of helping other women versus focusing on everything I lost. I just wanted one person to buy my shower shirt, one person to go, I validate this product, women are better than being in the shower with a trash bag after breast cancer and amputation of the breast. We literally put it on the market, and my first order was 500 units for a Central Florida-based HME DME. We're in about 70 retail distributor locations in the US. We were with the American Cancer Society, Health Products for You, and Walmart.com picked up the shower shirt. I have always been a person of faith, but until you're diagnosed with breast cancer, it becomes blind faith. I believe that blind faith put me into a vehicle to create this product, but I believe it was a power much higher than I that drove that process. The shower shirt wasn't created for me. It was created for your friends and your family members, my friends and my family members, and those hundreds of thousands of future breast cancer patients that will be diagnosed and have to undergo a mastectomy and not be reduced to a trash bag like I was, and like many before me. I never wanted breast cancer to define me. I wanted to make sure it only refined me. Think about that during your next trial and tribulation. Think about, how can I keep this adversity from defining my life? How can I only make it refine my life? And what can I learn from this to ultimately help others? Thank you very much.